She'll forgive me. She always does. That single sentence does more damage than the water ever will. Because this was never really about a prank. It was about a man who had already calculated her forgiveness in advance. The chandeliers burn gold above the ballroom. White orchids line every table in tall glass vases. Silver cutlery catches the candlelight. 200 guests hold their phones up, angled and ready, the way people wait for fireworks. Nadine Okafor stands at the center of the room in a gown she saved 4 months to afford. Beadwork traces the bodice like frost on glass. The train pulls behind her, catching light with every small movement. Her veil trembles with each breath she takes, and beneath it, her pulse taps steady against her throat. Kellan Whitmore lifts a silver bucket. The room falls quiet. Not from respect. From anticipation. Somewhere near the back, the bridesmaid giggles into her champagne glass. An uncle leans forward in his chair like he doesn't want to miss a second of it. Nadine looks at Kellan. She waits for the joke to end. She waits for him to lower the bucket, to laugh it off, to say, "I got you, didn't I?" She waits for the version of him she fell in love with to show up in this moment and make it stop. He does not. He smiles instead, the same easy, confident smile that once made her feel chosen. Now it looks like something else entirely. Water crashes over her head. It runs down her face in sheets, soaking through the veil, pulling at the beaded bodice she had fitted 4 separate times to get exactly right. Her mascara streaks black down her cheeks. Her curls flatten against her scalp. The dress, once weightless, grows heavy against her skin. The guests erupt. Someone near the front shouts, "The bride lost the bet." Lost the bet. 3 words. They land harder than the water did, harder than the cold, harder than 200 strangers laughing at the worst moment of her life. Nadine does not scream. She does not run for the doors. She stands there, soaked to the ribs, veil clinging to her jaw, and lets her eyes move slowly across the room, to the family table, where Brielle grins behind her raised phone, to the aunts filming from 3 different angles, to Kellan's father, lifting a champagne flute like this is a toast worth giving. She has imagined this moment 100 different ways over the last 2 days. In every version, she stayed calm. Tonight, she finds out she can actually do it. She lifts her chin. Water drips from the tip of her nose onto the marble floor, one slow drop at a time, like a clock counting down to something the room hasn't noticed yet. Then she speaks, calm, clear, loud enough for the microphone still clipped to Kellan's lapel to carry it across the room.
Enjoy this moment. It is the last time you will ever laugh at my silence.
The laughter dies in pieces, table by table, spreading outward like a stain, until the ballroom holds nothing but the sound of water dripping off satin onto stone. Kellan's smile falters for the first time all night. What? Nadine doesn't answer him. She turns instead toward Brielle, whose phone is still raised, whose grin has started, almost imperceptibly, to sleep. Why is she so calm? Why isn't she crying, or screaming, or running for the exit the way they all expected? The truth is, Nadine has known for 2 days. And in those 2 days, she has already decided exactly how tonight will end, not with her tears, but with theirs. If you've ever been humiliated by people who were supposed to protect you, comment, "I felt that" below. She's not done yet. And if you want to see exactly how Nadine turns this humiliation into their undoing, hit subscribe right now. 3 months earlier, no one could have predicted this ending, least of all Nadine. She grew up in a small apartment above her mother's tailoring shop in Lagos, then in a cramped duplex in Atlanta after they immigrated when she was 9 years old. Fabric scraps littered the floor of their kitchen like confetti nobody ever swept up. Her mother worked late into the night, hunched over a sewing machine that rattled the whole table, needle flashing under a single bare bulb.
Your name is the one thing nobody can take from you. Protect it. Everything else, they can take, not that.
Nadine never forgot it. She carried the sentence with her through school, through every room where she was the only one who looked like her, through every interview where she had to prove twice as much to be doubted half as little. She studied finance on a scholarship she wrote for at 2 in the morning between shifts at a campus coffee shop. She worked harder than anyone in her cohort, not because she loved proving herself, but because she'd learned early that the world rarely gave her the benefit of the doubt. By 28, she had built a reputation as the analyst who solved problems quietly, who never raised her voice in a meeting because she never needed to. Numbers didn't lie to her, and she never lied with them. She was not loud. She did not need to be. People trusted her the way people trust a bridge they've crossed 100 times without a single crack showing. That quiet trust was exactly what drew Kellen to her. They met at a charity gala, one of those glittering rooms where champagne flows more freely than conversation. Kellen found her by the dessert table, standing slightly apart from the crowd, watching everyone else perform. He told his friends, loud enough for her to hear, that she was different. She doesn't care about money, he said. She cares about people. For the first time in years, someone seemed to actually see her, not her degrees, not her salary, not the version of herself she polished for interviews, but her. She let herself believe it. She let herself fall. She did not yet understand what family she was stepping into. The Whitmores treated cruelty like a competitive sport, dressed up in cashmere and good posture. At her very first dinner with them, Brielle mocked her accent, softly, sweetly, in the exact tone people use so they can deny it later if you call them on it. Say that again, Brielle laughed. It's just so charming. Nadine repeated the word. The table laughed with her, not at her, Brielle insisted afterward. Nadine knew better. At a garden party weeks later, a cousin leaned in with a smile stretched too wide and asked, "Do you really think people like us will accept you?" Delivering it like a compliment, daring Nadine to react. Nadine smiled back. Not because it didn't sting. Because she refused to let any of them see exactly how deep it landed. Brielle noticed something in that silence. She mistook it for weakness, the way people who have never had to survive anything often mistake composure for absence of feeling. She began testing it further, small comments dropped into conversation like stones into still water, watching for ripples that never came. Nadine's stillness only seemed to sharpen her curiosity, and not in a kind way. She was wrong. But it would take a wedding, a bucket of water, and an entire family's slow unraveling for her to finally understand exactly how wrong she'd been. At one particular dinner, laughter rippled around the table at a joke about people who don't really belong in rooms like this. Nadine kept her fork moving, kept her face still. Kellen leaned close, his hand finding hers under the tablecloth, warm and reassuring. "Don't worry," he whispered against her ear. "Once they know you, they'll accept you." She wanted so badly to believe him. But somewhere underneath that sentence sat a question she wasn't ready to ask yet. Was he protecting her from his family, or quietly preparing her to survive them? Have you ever smiled through humiliation just to keep the peace? Comment: silence isn't weakness, if you know exactly what that feels like. Subscribe now to know exactly what this family was planning behind her back, and it is worse than you think. The idea starts, as cruelty so often does, as a joke over wine. 3 weeks before the wedding, Brielle raises her glass at a family dinner, candlelight flickering off the crystal. "We should see how she really handles being one of us," she says, grinning around the table. A real test. Something memorable, something she'll never forget. Someone laughs. Someone else leans in, already excited. A cousin suggests something involving champagne. An aunt suggests something with the seating chart. Brielle waves both ideas away. By the end of the night, it isn't a joke anymore. It's a plan, sketched out over dessert, with a prize attached to sharpen everyone's interest, a watch from the family's private collection, and something worth even more to people like the Whitmores: approval. Whoever manages to provoke the biggest reaction out of Nadine walks away the winner. Kellen sits at the head of the table through the entire conversation. He laughs along. He doesn't stop them, doesn't raise a single objection, doesn't once say this has gone too far. He tells himself later, lying awake, that it's harmless, a tradition, nothing more, the same kind of thing every new person in this family has to survive. He tells himself she'll laugh right along with everyone once she understands. He is wrong on both counts, though he won't discover that until it's far too late to matter. 2 days before the wedding, a friend in the bridal party accidentally forwards Nadine a video. Wrong group chat. Right family, wrong timing. Nadine watches it once, standing perfectly still in her kitchen. Then she watches it again. She sees the rehearsal, Brielle holding an empty bucket, practicing the angle, laughing as water slashes onto the kitchen tile during a trial run nobody thought to hide better. She hears the laughter in the background, easy and careless, the unmistakable sound of people who have never once considered the possibility of getting caught. She sees Kellen's face in the corner of the frame, nodding along, not stopping any of it. Then she reads the caption underneath the video, a message Kellen sent to the family group chat only an hour before the video was recorded. "She'll forgive me. She always does." That single sentence does more damage than the water ever will. Because this was never really about a prank. It was about a man who had already calculated her forgiveness in advance, who had learned to see her devotion not as love, but as a resource he could spend freely, knowing the account would never run dry. Nadine sets the phone down on the counter, screen still glowing. She does not cry. She does not call him screaming into the phone, does not throw anything, does not collapse onto the kitchen floor the way another version of her might have. She picks the phone back up instead and starts making calls, to her lawyer first, then to her bank, then to a forensic accountant she trusts from her farm, a woman named Priya who has helped her untangle messier things than this before. She doesn't tell her mother yet. She doesn't tell Adiz, her best friend, set to stand beside her as maid of honor in 48 hours. She tells no one, because telling someone would mean talking about it, and talking about it would mean feeling the full weight of it, the betrayal sitting in her chest like a stone she hasn't set down yet. There isn't room for that. Not yet. Instead, she opens her laptop at midnight and starts working the way she always works when the world gets too loud, methodically, quietly, one line item at a time. She reviews the joint account she and Kellen opened for wedding expenses. She calls the venue coordinator the next morning and asks, casually, what the cancellation policy looks like on the catering add-ons she personally paid for. She emails Priya a folder of financial documents she has been quietly compiling for months, documents she once told herself she was only organizing, never investigating. She sleeps 4 hours a night for 2 days straight. Her face in the mirror gives nothing away. When Kellen calls to ask if she's excited, her voice doesn't waver once. 2 days. That's all she has left before the wedding. And in those 2 days, Nadine Okafor plans to become someone the Whitmore family has never once had to face, a woman who already knows everything, and says absolutely nothing about it. What would you have done in her position, confronted them immediately, or let them walk straight into their own trap? Comment trap if you'd have done exactly what Nadine did. The morning of the wedding, Nadine wakes up early, before the sun has fully cleared the trees outside her window. She does her own makeup, steady-handed, unhurried, brush moving in slow, practiced strokes. She smiles at the mirror the way she has practiced smiling her whole life, enough to reassure whoever's watching, never quite enough to reveal what's underneath it. Kellen calls her at 9, his voice warm and syrupy with excitement, already half a step ahead of the day. "Today's the day," he says. "After this, you'll finally feel like you belong. Like you're really one of us." Nadine closes her eyes and lets the silence stretch for exactly one breath. She already knows, with a clarity that surprises even her, that she was never meant to belong in a place where love arrives wrapped around humiliation, where a family measures loyalty by what a person is willing to survive without complaint. But she says none of that. "I can't wait," she tells him instead, and it's true, just not for the reason he thinks it is. She gives him one final chance, almost without meaning to. At the rehearsal breakfast, over eggs neither of them really eats, she looks at him across the table and asks, gently, evenly, "Is there anything about today I should know? Any surprises?" It is a door. A small one, easy to miss if you're not looking for it. He could walk through it. He could tell her everything right now, apologize, call the whole thing off, choose her over his family's idea of a good laugh before it becomes something neither of them can take back. Kellen laughs instead, waving a fork like the question is silly. "Just that you're about to become a Whitmore," he says, grinning. "That's surprise enough, isn't it?" He chooses the lie. She watches him choose it, watches the exact moment pass, and files it away with everything else. By afternoon, the ballroom fills with white orchids and flickering candlelight. Guests arrive in gowns and tailored tuxedos, phones already charged and ready for a night they've all been quietly promised will be unforgettable. Across the room, Brielle keeps glancing toward the head table, where a silver bucket sits tucked beneath a linen cloth, hidden like a magician's final trick waiting for its cue. Nadine walks the aisle in her gown, veil trembling with each step, holding a bouquet of white roses tight enough to keep her hands from shaking. She smiles at family members she has, unknown to any of them, already begun quietly disentangling herself from, financially, legally, completely, one signature and one phone call at a time. Her mother sits in the second row, dabbing at her eyes with a folded handkerchief she sewed herself years ago. She has no idea what her daughter knows. She only sees a bright glowing under chandelier light, and she lets herself believe, for these few minutes, that the years of sacrifice led exactly here. Nadine catches her mother's eye for half a second as she passes and holds it a moment longer than she needs to, a private thank you neither of them will ever say out loud. Adiz walks just behind her, close enough to notice something isn't quite right, though she can't name what. Nadine had told her only this, trust me tonight, no matter what happens. Adiz had asked what that meant. Nadine had only smiled and said, you'll understand by the end of the reception. The officiant speaks of commitment, of building a life on honesty. Nadine listens to every word land in a room full of people who have already decided to lie to her one final time before the night is through. The vows are spoken. The rings are exchanged. Applause rises through the room like a wave building toward shore. Then the reception begins, and a microphone is passed down the head table to Kellen for the traditional groom's toast. Across the room, Brielle exchanges a glance with her cousins, quick and electric. Someone lifts a phone. The recording light blinks on. Nadine watches the bucket reappear from beneath the table, and she does not flinch. She has been waiting for this exact moment for 2 full days. Would you have walked away the second you found out about the plan, or stayed to watch it unfold the way Nadine did? Comment stay or walk below. Hit subscribe button if you are still watching. The music stops. Kellen lifts the microphone, and his voice fills the ballroom, sweet and rehearsed, practiced in front of a bathroom mirror the night before. Nadine, from the day I met you, I knew you were different. Guests smile. Phones rise a little higher, angling for a better shot. But in this family, he continues, grinning at his own cousins, we have a little tradition. A test, to see if you can really handle being one of us. Kellen Whitmore steps forward, bucket in hand, and the room leans in together, delighted, hungry for the exact moment they've all been quietly promised all evening. The water falls. It hits Nadine's shoulders fast, then soaks through the veil, then runs down the beaded bodice she paid for herself, one careful installment at a time. It streams down in sheets, pulling at her feet on the marble floor. Her curls flatten against her scalp. Her mascara streaks like ink down porcelain skin, and for one long second, the entire room seems to hold its breath, waiting. The guests erupt into laughter. The woman they all expected to collapse simply stands there. No tears. No trembling hands rushing to cover her face. No dramatic exit toward the doors. Just stillness, the kind of stillness that unsettles a room faster than any scream could. For one full second, nobody in the room moves. Not the aunts with their phones raised. Not Brielle, empty bucket still tilted in her hands, watching Nadine's face for the crack she was promised would come. Not even Kellen, who seems to expect her to burst into tears at any moment, the way the plan always assumed she would. Adiz, seated near the front, rises halfway out of her chair before catching herself, hand pressed to her mouth. Nadine's mother goes utterly still at the second row table, handkerchief forgotten in her lap, watching her daughter with an expression that has nothing to do with confusion and everything to do with recognition. She taught this daughter to protect her name, and here, finally, is the moment that lesson was for. Kellen leans toward the microphone, grinning at his own cleverness, riding the laughter like it belongs to him. We wanted to see if you could handle being one of us. Nadine steps forward, water still dripping off her fingertips onto the floor in a slow, steady rhythm, and speaks into the silence that begins to spread behind the laughter. You didn't test my strength, she says, voice steady, carrying easily across the stand room. You revealed your character. The laughter falters, table by table, the way a wave pulls back right before it crashes. I know about the bet, she continues. I've known for 2 days. I know about the watch, and the video, and the message you sent your family promising them I'd forgive you no matter what you did. She looks directly at Kellen now, and he seems to shrink slightly under it. I've already called the vendors. I've already removed my name from every account we shared. And 3 weeks ago, while I was helping organize your family's financial reports, because you asked me to, because you trusted my iPhone numbers, I found something none of you ever meant for me to see. The room goes still in a way it has never been still before, silverware frozen mid-air, phones still recording but nobody quite believing what they're catching. Even the band, waiting in the corner for their cue to strike up the next song, lowers their instruments without being asked. Fake charity accounts, she says. Invoices that don't match. Money moving somewhere your investors were never told about. Her voice does not rise. It does not need to. Every word lands exactly where she means it to. I stayed quiet about it because I loved you. Tonight, I stop. She turns, veil heavy with water, train dragging wet lines across the marble, and this time completely alone, and not once looking back at the family table, or at Kellen, or at Brielle's phone still weakly recording a moment none of them will ever be able to delete from the internet. They thought the humiliation was the end of Nadine's story. They had no idea it was only the beginning of theirs. If this moment gave you chills, comment character over strength, and let her know you saw it. Nadine does not call a lawyer to attack the Whitmores. She calls one to report what she found, because staying silent about it now would make her complicit in something she never agreed to carry in the first place. Within weeks, auditors arrive quietly at the family's offices, carrying briefcases and clipboards, asking questions in flat, careful voices. Investors start calling, wanting answers nobody at the company can give them cleanly anymore. Long-standing partnerships dissolve one email at a time, politely, without drama, the way relationships built on appearances tend to end. None of it happens because Nadine wanted revenge. It happens because the truth, once released into daylight, simply keeps moving on its own. Kellen calls her one evening, weeks later, his voice hollow in a way she has never once heard from him before. You did this, he says. Nadine sits in her office, papers stacked neatly on the desk beside her, city lights blinking through the window behind her. She answers without raising her voice, the same steadiness she carried through the entire wedding night. No, she says. I stopped carrying the weight of your choices. He apologizes, the words tumbling out fast and unpolished, nothing like the rehearsed toast from that night. He says the prank went too far, that it was never supposed to hurt her this badly, that his family always took things too far and he should have stopped it the moment it started. Nadine listens to all of it. Then she asks him one question, quiet and precise. If I had cried that day, would you have apologized? Silence stretches across the line, long enough to become its own answer. Neither of them needs to say it out loud. They both already know exactly what it is. Months pass. The Whitmore name, once stitched into hospital wings and gala programs and glossy magazine spreads, grows quieter in the rooms it used to dominate without effort. Brielle sends a message once, brief and unconvincing, calling the whole thing a joke that got out of hand, nothing more. Nadine reads it and doesn't respond. Some doors don't need slamming shut. They simply stay closed, and eventually people stop knocking. Adiz asks her once, over coffee, whether she regrets any of it, the exposure, the fallout, the quiet destruction of a family that once seemed untouchable. Nadine stirs her cup slowly before answering. I didn't destroy anything, she says. I just stopped protecting people who were never planning to protect me. Adiz doesn't push further. She doesn't need to. The answer sits between them, settled and complete. Nadine's mother visits her new office one afternoon, running her fingers along the edge of a framed photo on the shelf, the two of them, years younger, standing outside the tailoring shop in Lagos. She doesn't say much. She never does. But she squeezes her daughter's hand before she leaves, the same way she used to when Nadine was small enough to sit on the shop floor sorting buttons by color, and says only, your name is still yours. Nadine builds something of her own instead. She starts a foundation teaching young entrepreneurs, especially young women who remind her of herself at 20, how to build businesses on transparency instead of performance, on substance instead of appearances. She speaks at community centers on weekends. She mentors interns who remind her of the girl she used to be, hunched over homework at a kitchen table that smelled like thread and quiet ambition. She forgives the Whitmores eventually, in the quiet way that costs her nothing and demands nothing back in return. But she does not return to them. Forgiveness, she tells the young women she mentors, over coffee in her office, was never meant to be a ticket back into a room that never valued her to begin with. Years later, when people ask her about that wedding day, she doesn't talk about the bucket, or the bet, or the laughter that filled that ballroom for exactly as long as it took her to speak 11 words into a microphone. She talks about clarity instead. Sometimes, she says, the people who try to embarrass you in public are only speeding up something that was always going to be revealed in private, one way or another. Your job was never to make them pay for it. Your job is to keep your hands clean while the truth finishes the rest of the work on its own. The lesson was never really that cruelty always falls, that karma arrives on schedule, neat and satisfying. It was simpler than that, and considerably harder to actually live by. Don't let someone else's cruelty decide who you become in return. They placed a bet that night. They bet that Nadine would break in front of everyone. They were wrong. She was already rebuilding, quietly, methodically, brick by brick, long before the water ever touched her dress, because that is what women like her mother taught her to do, and no bucket, no bet, no ballroom full of laughter was ever going to change it. If Nadine's story taught you something about dignity, comment rebuilding and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe for more stories. Don't forget to hit the notification button so you won't miss any.